Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and we're back at it with spoiler season for Magic the Gathering's Avatar: The Last Airbender expansion. Someone in a recent comment said that they're only called sets and not expansions. Well, I've been calling them expansions since 1994, so shut up, sit down, and let's check out the cards. Before we dive in, please hit the like button. It helps me get the video out to so many more people, which helps the channel grow, and I appreciate it more than I can express with words. I know I say that every time, but I truly mean it. And if you're new here, make sure you subscribe so you never miss any of the content. Tons of spoiler content on the way. A couple really cool deck techs that I haven't shown you guys yet. Lots of cool stuff in store. So let's dive in. This is day 2 of spoiler season. We don't have a ton of cards to go over here, but the ones that we do have to go over are looking really interesting. First off, we've got Unlucky Cabbage Merchant. Now, this was one that was spoiled back when they first unveiled the set months ago, but it is important that we just cover it here again for posterity's sake. A 2/2 human citizen for 1 green and 1. When it enters, you create a food token, and whenever you sacrifice a food, you may search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped. If you search your library this way, put this creature on the bottom of its owner's library, and then shuffle. What an interesting card. So if you use a food to fetch out a land, then your Unlucky Cabbage Merchant goes back into your deck. What's interesting is if you have a way to sacrifice all of your foods at once, if you're playing some kind of sacrifice deck with a free sacrifice ability that allows you to sacrifice artifacts, you could just sacrifice one after another in response. And then just let them all resolve after the Unlucky Cabbage Merchant has been shuffled away, and you could just get a whole bunch of lands out at the same time. I think that would be a really interesting line to take. I'm excited to see if something like that actually ends up being relevant in Standard. I think it's a really cool idea. It might be a little bit more of a meme than a dream, but I'm hoping, man. I'm crossing my fingers. I think it could be really cool. Next up, we've got Tio, Spirited Glider, a 1/4 legendary human pilot ally with flying for 1 blue and 3. Whenever one or more creatures you control with flying attack, you draw a card and then discard a card. And when you discard a non-land card this way, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So it's kind of like Connive, but it's kind of like Super Connive, because you don't just put the +1/+1 counter on this thing if you discard a non-land card. You get to put it on anything, which is kind of sick, and it triggers whenever any creatures with flying attack. So you don't have to necessarily attack with Tio. You can hold Tio back as a nice in-the-air blocker with a big butt and swing in with something that's more relevant to attack with higher power. Race down your opponent quick in the air while drawing cards, sifting through your deck for what you need, and just shooting counters off everywhere. The one downside to this is it's not Raffine, right? It's not going to trigger for each attacking creatures. It's only going to trigger once. But that being said, Raffine's was busted. So, and this is just an uncommon. This is mostly meant for limited. I still think it's going to be a pretty cool card. Evasion's really important in limited, so I actually like everything that this card is doing. Next up, we've got Ty Lee, Artful Acrobat, a 3/2 legendary human performer with prowess for 1 red and 2. And whenever Ty Lee attacks, you may pay 1. When you do, target creature can't block this turn. What an interesting card. I think this is going to be really good in limited. If the prowess deck is a real thing, a real archetype in limited, and it seems like it is, you can buff this thing up to high hell and just leave one little incidental mana left over to make sure their best blocker can't block, right? That's not nothing. That's pretty good when you're in a deck that's buffing up all of your creatures with prowess. So I think it's pretty cool. In some other universe, I think this card is useful in Constructed, in Standard in particular. The problem is right now the power level of Standard is insane, and that's mostly because of the depth of the card pool. Having 3 years in Standard instead of 2 means we have this massive card pool, and now having 6 to 7 sets a year makes it even more massive, and because of that the card quality is at an all-time high in Standard. It almost feels like Pioneer Light in a way. I say that all the time, which I don't think is a good thing personally, because a card like this if it was in the traditional standard back in the day with, 2 years and maybe like 6 or 7 sets, something like this might actually be powerful enough to see play in a prowess-centric aggro deck, but it just gets way priced out, way power leveled out because of power creep in the current standard the way it is right now. So cards like this just don't see play. In Limited, though, I think this is going to be awesome, and I really hope I'm wrong about Constructed, because I think this is a really cool card, and I just hate that it gets overshadowed by an absolutely insanely deep card pool in Standard that is power crept to oblivion. Next up, we've got Northern Air Temple. This is the first temple I've seen that actually has me kind of interested in potentially making a shrine deck in Constructed, in Standard in particular. This is a legendary enchantment shrine for just 1 black mana, and when it enters, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of shrines you control. Whenever another shrine you control enters, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So it's a bunch of incidental drain that's going to help keep you alive against aggro decks, but also just be a clock on your opponent and eventually kill them. It's a win condition, and even though it's legendary, you can still drop a second one or even a third one later on in the game and get that enters trigger and make your opponent lose a whole bunch of life for all of the shrines that you've gone wide with for just this 1 mana, which I think is really cool. So I am getting pretty excited to try and brew around shrines because of a card like this. It really just remains to be seen how many shrines are actually coming. If it's just 1 cycle, it's going to be a little rough, but if maybe we have a cycle of uncommons and a cycle of rare shrines, now we're talking, right? Maybe shrines can finally be a real thing in Standard for the first time in a long time, and I'm excited about that. This card being so cheap and just being a win condition has me really excited, so I can't wait to see the rest of the shrines. Next up, we've got Ty Lee, Chi Blocker, a 2/1 legendary human performer ally for 1 blue and 2. She's got Flash and Prowess. Again, we're seeing that Prowess deck build itself up. Hopefully, if Vivi gets banned, we'll actually see some of these cards make the cut in Standard Prowess. But she also has another ability. When Ty Lee enters, tap up to 1 target creature. It doesn't untap during its controller's untap step for as long as you control Ty Lee. I think this card is deceptively good, and in a world with Vivi, it's kind of hard to appreciate just how much potential a card like this has, but the fact that you can flash it in at instant speed during combat if you want, use it as a combat trick to tap down their thing, but then also be able to block something that they didn't foresee you being able to block, and potentially even buff this up with the Prowess trigger by casting a couple other spells, really cheap spells, after you flash this in. So maybe this doesn't even die when it blocks and it kills their somewhat bigger thing. There's a lot of card advantage that you can set up with a card like this if you do it just right, but at the end of the day, even just flashing in a Prowess dude that's going to be able to race your opponent as soon as you get to untap, while also tapping down their dude and keeping it tapped down forever, is really good tempo. So even if you can't pull out the really weird out of nowhere block with this, all of the other value that's associated with it makes it really awesome. So I'm super excited to see where this goes. Honestly, this set's looking really cool. I'm not like the biggest Avatar fan in the world. I have a lot of respect for it. But in general, Universes Beyond, I'm a little weary of. I'm a little hesitant with how much they're just jamming into the game. But setting all of that aside and just evaluating all of the cards we've seen so far on a purely mechanical basis, I'm actually kind of excited about what this set is bringing to Magic, and more importantly, what it's bringing to Standard. Next up, we've got Diligent Zookeeper, a 4/4 human citizen ally for 1 green and 3. Each non-human creature you control gets +1/+1 for each of its creature types to a maximum of 10. What an interesting card. When I first saw this, I got really excited. I got a little bit ahead of myself, and I was thinking, oh, changelings, shapeshifters with changeling. There's already a few in Standard. We know there's more coming in Lorwyn, the first set that's coming out next year in 2026. So that was immediately where my head went, but I was getting a little bit ahead of myself because changelings count as humans, so they will not be non-human creatures. that will get buffed up, which is kind of a shame because they'd get the full +10/+10 here from this guy if they did work, which would be absolutely insane. That being said, there's still gotta be a decent number of creature cards that have a whole bunch of creature types, right? I'm not really sure. I think the most common number that's somewhat high is probably 3. Most of the creatures we've seen in this set are 3. So this can give, like, I don't know, a +3/+3 to buff to all of your non-humans, which is still pretty powerful under the right circumstances. But what's cool is, as long as you're not playing humans in the deck, it's at least giving everything a +1/+1. It makes me wonder if this is usable in, like, a mono green stompy deck, or maybe a Gruul stompy deck or something like that, where like some of the cards are just pound for pound too good to not play, even though they might only have one creature type and only get the normal Anthem ability from this, the normal +1/+1. But maybe some of the other creatures in the deck do happen to have like 2 or maybe 3, possibly even 4 creature types, and they're getting a huge buff out of this, and I still think this is worth running in a deck like that. So I don't think you need to go super deep into this crazy multi-tribal thing to get value out of Diligent Zookeeper, but I am super curious to see if there is some kind of crazy super tribal deck that utilizes 3 or 4 creature type creatures with this to get the absolute most value out of every card. If you have ideas about what that deck would look like, definitely let me know in the comments. I think it could exist, and we should probably try and build it for early access. Next up, we've got Foggy Swamp Visions, and this is the first time I'm seeing this card right here, right now. A sorcery for 2 black and 1. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you Waterbend X, and you can use any colorless mana to pay for that Waterbend X, but you can also tap creatures, and every single creature you tap is going to pay for 1 of the Waterbend X, which is nice. Then you exile X target creature cards from graveyards. For each creature card exiled this way, create a token that's a copy of it. At the beginning of your next end step, sacrifice those tokens. This card's really interesting. There's a few things that I want to note. First of all, for 3 mana, you could theoretically bring back a whole bunch of creatures all at once for less than the cost of a Zombify, which is kind of insane, right? That being said, in order to do that on curve at least, you're going to need to find a way to get a bunch of creatures into the graveyard in just your first 2 turns, right? With like 1 mana and then 2 mana. And that's going to be a little bit tricky to set that up. So I don't necessarily think this is meant to just be jammed ASAP on 3 and do the thing. I think you're probably supposed to use it more tactically. The other thing that's worth pointing out about this card is simply the fact that the tokens that you make that are copies of the creatures you exile do not have haste. So you have to be very careful with how you build around this. There's 2 different ways that I can think of off the top of my head. First of all, you could just play this with a bunch of creatures that are utility creatures that have enters the battlefield abilities that do super relevant things even if they're only there for that 1 turn. And then you can just get all of those ETB triggers, do a whole bunch of stuff, get a bunch of value, and it doesn't really matter that they die. Another way is just play this with a bunch of really big creatures that have haste. Just instead of running all of the normal Reanimator targets, maybe your Reanimator targets are slightly less powerful in order to make sure they all have haste, but you're gonna put multiple into play all at once on the same turn as early as you can manage to get them into the graveyard, and then probably just swing for the win that way. That's another way you could use this. I think the most interesting way is maybe in a sacrifice deck, an aristocrat style deck with like Sephiroth or something like that. If you have a sacrifice outlet that doesn't cost you any mana, you can all of a sudden bring back all of the things that you have already sacrificed. They all come back onto the board at once, and you can just have a whole bunch of sacrifice fodder. Boom, 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 boom. Get all of your triggers. Go nuts. That's another cool way I think you could use this card. So there are a bunch of ways you can try to make this work. Are any of them actually going to be able to work? Are any of them actually going to be able to be good enough to really make the cut in some of these decks in Standard? Really hard to say, but at the very least, we at least have ideas to explore here. And if you have ideas yourself, definitely let me know in the comments, because again, we're going to be doing the early access event, huge marathon stream. on Wednesday. I believe that's Wednesday the 12th. I believe it's Wednesday. Is it the 12th or is it the 5th? It's one of those. It's one of, I think it's the 12th. I'm pretty sure it's the 12th. November 12th. We'll be taking part in early access. We'll be putting together all sorts of crazy decks. So if you have ideas for decks, let me know in the comments, and we'll try and run all the ridiculous stuff that you guys come up with. But next up, we've got the Mechanist Aerial Artisan, a 1/3 legendary human artificer ally for 1 blue and 2. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a clue token. That's already pretty interesting. Jam this in a prowess deck, and every time you're trying to trigger your prowess with your non-creature spells, you're also getting card advantage for later. And potentially, if it's some kind of a weird prowess artifact deck, even before you sacrifice those clues to draw cards, it's just going to help you go wide with a bunch of artifacts that could work with your artifact synergies. That seems really interesting as well. But then the second ability of this guy is what really pushes him over the edge. You can tap him, and until end of turn, target artifact token you control becomes a 3/1 construct artifact creature with flying, which seems just super push to me. Just jam this out. Every non-creature spell you play gives you a clue token. You could turn that into a 3/1 flyer and just smash into your opponent's face. Just seems like there's a lot of pushed value on this guy, both on the card advantage side, where you're constantly generating clue tokens that can just refill your hand, but also being able to create 3 power flyers out of nowhere and just get in every single turn. Or if you're desperate, just save it as a blocker to block and trade with one of their flyers. Seems really good. There's just a lot of card advantage here, a lot of versatility in what this card brings to the table. I'm excited to see where it lands. Is it good enough to see play in like constructed artifact decks or anything like that? Hard to say. Simulacrum Synthesizer's a hell of a drug right now. Does this belong in that deck? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Certainly would make a lot of artifacts for your guys to get super pumped up. I have a feeling that there's probably some other kind of deck that we haven't thought of yet that this slots into nicely. Maybe we'll get a better idea of that, a more clear picture of that as more cards get spoiled. But definitely pound for pound, there is a ton of value in this card. Next up, we've got Bumi Unleashed, the first mythic of the day. This is a 5/4 legendary human noble ally with trample for 5 mana in the colors of Gruul. And when Bumi enters, you get to Earthbend 4. So you get a 5/4 trampler and turn one of your lands into a 4/4 that, if it dies, comes back as the non-creature version of the land. All of that is already really good for your 5 mana, but then it just gets absurd from there. Whenever Bumi deals combat damage to a player, you untap all lands you control. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase. Only land creatures can attack during that combat phase. This guy is definitely meant to be the top end of an absolutely insanely pushed go deep Earthbending deck. Earthbending, I think, is going to be broken, guys. I truly think Earthbending is nuts. Not only can you get potentially just chump blockers that bring themselves back as the land, which is already nuts, but there's just so many synergies to utilize with these land creatures that you're creating. We've already seen cards that help you generate double the mana out of the lands that are Earthbent. We've seen cards that give the Earthbent lands keyword abilities like Vigilance or Trample. We've seen a lot of ways to synergize with Earthbending as a mechanic, and some really, really crazy cards at the top end that can work with Earthbending. And I have a feeling that Earthbending is going to be a force to be reckoned with. It might even be the most powerful new deck to come out of this set. And it's too early to say for sure, because we have so many other cards that they still have to spoil. But if I was to bet right now and put my money on a certain archetype having the best chance of being a real contender as a new archetype in Standard, I truly think it's Earthbending. I think the Earthbending mechanic looks absolutely nutty. The Firebending mechanic looks really powerful too, but something about the Earthbending mechanics just really got me convinced that this mechanic's going to be nuts, and I can't wait to figure out how best to use it in Standard. I think it's going to be nuts, and I think this guy is going to be a solid part of that deck. But that brings us to our last card of the day, the only other mythic, Planetarium of Wan Shi Tong. This is a legendary artifact for 6 colorless mana, which is a lot, but you can pay 1, tap it, scry 2, which doesn't seem like very much for your 6 mana. But the second ability is where this card gets nutty. Whenever you scry or surveil, you look at the top card of your library, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Do this only once each turn. This ability is absolutely busted, and it's even more busted than it looks. Sure, it can enable itself for just 1 mana. You get to look at the top 2. The best card from among the top 2 you just play for free. The other one you can choose to put on top or on the bottom. And if you're desperate and you don't hit anything super good in those 2 cards, you could always just scribe both of them to the bottom and take a chance on free playing whatever happens to be on top. That seems kind of crazy. You still get the value of the scry while also getting to free cast whatever you want. Not whatever you want, but whatever you set up to be able to free cast. But where this card gets even crazier is the fact that having this ability built in means it's a way to utilize this effect on your opponent's turn. As long as you can find any other way to scry on your turn, especially if it's a way that's going to cost little to no mana, you can use some other card that you're scrying with to trigger this on your turn and free cast the best card that you can find while scrying. But then you can also then just pay 1 mana and tap this on your opponent's turn to do it again on your opponent's turn, because it's not limited to only triggering on your turn. It triggers once a turn, so once on your turn and once on their turn, which is just kind of crazy. I'm super excited to brew with this and see how deep we can take that concept. We just got to figure out what the most efficient cards that let you scry end up being, especially if they're cards that let you scry over and over and over again, not just a one-time scry. So if you guys have ideas about the best, most efficient ways to trigger this and get that scry potential and get some free spells, definitely let me know in the comments, because this is a deck we absolutely have to build during early access. It looks completely crazy. It looks poised to just be, at the very least, an insane meme that's just everywhere during early access, but possibly a real contender, depending on how the other cards in the deck line up with this. So I'm really excited about a card like this existing. Is it going to be too good? Is it going to be broken? Maybe. We'll have to wait and see. But that's going to bring us to the end of the video, guys. Thank you guys so much for checking out the video. If you haven't already, please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. That stuff helps me out so much. And make sure you stick around. I've got more content on the way. More spoilers, some deck techs, some really cool stuff on the way. Thank you for checking out the video, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck techs, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.